Okay, it's just about to start. There we go. Yeah, so can you tell me about your business goals for the next 12, 18 months, and if they differ from those of the finance function, how?
No, actually, that's a great question. And when you look at how we define our goals and how we develop our objectives and move forward with it, the nice part about SEL Health is we have one strategic plan. We call it Mission Forward 2025. So it's moving ourselves over for the next 4 years now. And it has four pillars that are part of it. Those four pillars are an aligned and empowered organization, growth, an aligned clinician network, clinical and operational transformation. So as we start to allocate resources, plan the projects that we want to move forward with, both internally as well as with our partners that are out there, those are all have to move the bar on one or more of those four strategic imperatives. Within there's a bunch of initiatives that are listed, and the nice thing is, as we've done pre-pandemic, through the pandemic, and now post-pandemic, we've been able to validate that the work that we had put together, that the board had approved with our senior team of the strategic plan, is consistent and has not changed. Now, some of the work that is up underneath, certainly we had some acceleration of some of the work, which is really nice. In some cases, we had some reprioritization, but overall the program is the same. So when you look at ourselves from information technology and digital services, and that's what we're called, it actually very aligns with the other system services or the other clinical areas, because we all kind of have the same, we all want to move the same bars.
Sounds like good news. In terms of the integration of the goals. So as we're focusing in this report on ERP modernization and finance transformation, are there any pressure points which drive the need for that kind of ERP modernization and finance transformation?
Yeah, I think the key there is, when you have a current system and process in place, and especially with ERP, which in many cases, those systems can last 15, 20 years before you reinvest into those, you kind of get yourself into a continuous improvement route so that every year you're hopefully becoming more efficient and more effective with the tools. But in order to really transform and change the work altogether, which is a different culture, different mentality for the team, as well as you now have higher expectations of some of the changes that are the impact of the changes that you want to make, it really becomes very transformational. So those kinds of that movement, we actually just went live with a new ERP system this April 1st of this past year. So we've only been live now for 2 months on it. And prior to that, that system had been here for 15 to 20 years. And so when you go through the process to get approval for the funding, because these are investments, and like any investment that you make in your personal life, in your professional life, you want some kind of measurable return on making those investments. So there was a clear line of objectives that we wanted to get out of the system, both in terms of the internal processes to be more efficient, but also in terms of how we were impacting our associates and others who use the system to be more effective in their work. And it's not just being better than last year, it really is making a big leap forward. The thing that you learn, that you find out when you make these big transformations, in order to take those 2 steps forward, you really take 1 step back. So as you go through the change management and you go through the first, several months of just stabilizing, moving yourself on a new platform, then you start to transition yourself into the operational piece. Now, how do I now get to my measurements, my metrics back to where they were? And then you quickly move into optimization. How do I drive, the cost down? How do I drive the benefits up? And start the optimization phase of it. So it kind of goes into several of those different timelines. And your goal as a chief information officer or a CFO or any of the members of the C-suite that are engaged, human resources, et cetera, your goal is to see how you can accelerate those transformations, those big steps that take place in a very fluid way. So you got to be agile, because in some cases, some of our associates, both on the receiving and the sending side of this data, they may have been doing this for a long time. And so some of this can be very eye-opening. In many cases, people will embrace it. In some cases, people will be a little bit hesitant about it, So we got to make sure we kind of tease out and make sure that we do meet or exceed the objectives that we're given, and also ensure that, when we work with our teammates, our associates, that we're making this transition as easy and as painless as possible. But there will be a lot of things that can be done differently, and that takes time. Our goal is to accelerate that time, though.
So it sounds like I'm hearing, on terms of the biggest pressure points driving a need for this kind of transformation. You mentioned
efficiency. So
yeah.
part of it is to make sure that you can do what you're doing today at a materially less cost. So we're trying to reduce the cost of healthcare by driving down how much it costs us to do things, and also then the effectiveness. So I'm receiving the output from something from finance or human resource to supply chain. How does that now on the other side pick up my game, allow me to do that more easier, faster, better? So really it's kind of a weighing of both, of really trying to get things out quicker. So using the machine to do some of the work. So this is a little bit of a digital transformation aspect of it. How do we use the machine to take care of a lot of those tasks and automatically, process things versus a human always having to intervene? And then on the other side, which gives you more efficiency as well as more accuracy, and they can operate, 7/24. And then on the output side, you want me, the recipient of that output, how does that help move my game forward? Not just a little bit better than yesterday, but truly transformational, large stair steps in what I'm able to do and how I'm able to use the system.
Can you give any examples of how the decisions you make about transformation and different technology feed through to efficiency, effectiveness, accuracy, or 24/7 operations, or any other advantages you want to speak to?
Well, I can give you an example. Some of the work that we're doing really on the clinical side, I think would be a great one to kind of lay this way. And this is how we're trying to evolve and mature on the system services side. So we actually are working with a partner, and we're putting in place a product called conversational artificial intelligence. And what that is, that basically is the machine. We've taught the machine to be able to take a conversation between a patient and a provider, and they may have a 15-20 minute conversation. Typically, an outcome of that conversation, a provider will then dictate, what the meaningful aspects of that, and that drives billing codes, diagnosis codes, and then that drives, the end game. When you have the machine in place, as opposed to that taking place, when you're done with the conversation, like for example, our conversation, the machine says, okay, these are the parts of that conversation that are relevant. These are the parts that are really irrelevant. Maybe I was talking about my children, talking about this or talking about that, just kind of small talk or things that were being repetitive in that conversation. It carves all that out, and it actually creates that medical note based upon the 20-minute conversation. And then it gives you suggested codes based upon that of what you can do to bill or put in the diagnosis side. And when you look at it now as a provider, as opposed to me dictating and going back and having to review, I just have to review what you're giving me. So it's really kind of automating a scribe process of some human sitting there doing all that and say, okay, based upon this is the output. The machine's doing it for you. And when you correct something, the machine says, oh, next time I'm processing and I see that, now I will adjust it so that it's more accurate, more correct, more concise. And as you move your way through those processes, and that's really a big part for me is some of the robotic process automations that we'll do on these back end systems, and really utilizing the intelligence that a human has and putting that into the hands of a machine, so that machine can actually do those processes. It's like on the financial side, if getting you have a large invoice coming in to be paid, the machine can go allocate what was purchased and do line item detail and compare and contrast all of that. It says, hey, everything lines up, go ahead and pay it. A human does not have to be there to say, okay, look at this, look at this, look at this, and really kind of do that. The machine can do it and then maybe offer up exceptions. This is something that was purchased. Here was the invoice. There's a clash there. Maybe a human has to come in to intervene and say, oh yeah, but that was because of this second PO that kind of came through, a little bit farther down the road. So they invoicing us once, but it was really two orders put together. The machine now can say, oh, next time that happens, I can go back and look and see if I can kind of adjust that going. So again, the machine is really part of when you look at artificial intelligence and really automating what we're doing. It's what you do, with in your personal life in many cases, whether you're in retail and looking to buy something and it understands what your buying habits are and it offers up to you. This is what really would be good for Asher. Netflix, same way, right? So, and then when you look at things like a GPS system, another artificial intelligence, based upon the based upon the time of day, what's happened during that day, was it an accident, not accident, prime time, rush hour, not rush hour. The GPS will automatically for you reconfigure your route so that you can be more effective with your time, more efficient in getting to the location versus the old way with a map. You would still kind of take the same route, then you'd be sitting in traffic and may reroute you to go around because of certain conditions that occurred that time. The machine's been taught to do that, and now it does it for us. And now, as a human, you rely on it. You really don't say, "Oh, why is it doing that?" Well, I know it's going to get me there because that my preferred route now has changed. And then that's the same thing that we're bringing out into the commercial business.
Yeah, those examples are really nice. Thank you. And as I go through the other questions, anything other examples that come to mind are really handy to grip onto for people who might be unfamiliar.
Yeah.
So that's great. Next question is about risks. What do you think of as the biggest risks associated with ERP modernization?
The risk with what?
Well, associated with the kind of transformation and taking on the new technology that deals with any kind of information that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think the biggest risk is trying to make sure that you understand the change management and you can be very sensitive to the changes that are going to happen to a human. So, when you start to look at a person, that is certainly near and dear to most of us, all of us leaders' hearts, is we really want to help to promote and move people forward. But sometimes when you bring in technology, it can be looked at as a threat. And some people, when it comes to change, they may be at a point in their career, it's like, this is just too much of a change for me. I really liked it the old way, and I don't have maybe a longevity left in my career, so this is really too much for me. And making sure you understand that people are going through this. So you look at the preparation, right, the planning aspect of putting this together, and you understand the numbers and the different metrics that you want to gain as you put a new system into place. And then you look at your culture and the different people in some of those, try to forecast and predict who's going to be impacted and who's are those we need to be a little bit more sensitive to. If you know there's going to be efficiencies, then when you go through that process, you try to hold back positions, knowing that if efficiencies are going to take place, that you don't want to impact the person, you want to impact the position. So a position becomes vacant, then you say, okay, I'm not going to fill it, or I'll fill it with a temp for a period of time because I don't want to put a person in there, then have him or her then at some point have to be not needed for that role any further. Then as you go through the implementations of these large projects or programs, there's a lot of anxiety because in many cases, you only do this once or twice in your career. You don't do it every day. You don't do it every week, month, year. These are huge 20-year changes that you're putting into place. And so you have to be very sensitive and be able to try to read the room of people that are struggling and help them, kind of get through the implementation. Now you're in the new day world. And now is the opportunity to start to drive the optimization piece. And that's really where, for many people, a lot of the fun comes into place because now you're actually able to see the measurable changes that you're impacting upon our system, which results impacts for our patients positively. So those impacts that you are doing to make us more effective, efficient, getting the right tools in the right hands of our providers, allowing them to be able to make good decisions on their patients. So you're starting to be able to see how you are really, truly impacting the cost of healthcare by reducing it and improving the outcomes of healthcare with these kinds of major changes. And that really is hopefully very exciting for many people because it's really living the mission of somebody like SCL Health. You are living the mission and being able to do exactly how we want to do in order to treat our patients, our communities, our populations, and especially those that are poor and vulnerable. So the impact of all of these back-end systems, like in human resources, for example. And then when you look at, or ERP, for example, then when you look at how it affects the associates, hopefully people are now spending less time trying to interact with human resources or supply chain or finance or payroll, because we've created a better product and a better process to produce that product for them. It allows that to be a lot easier for them coming forward, so they can now reallocate that time that they were spent doing administrative work to go doing actual work that would be more effective for their role.
Yeah, that's a nice rounded description of the process. Okay. So now I want to ask you some questions about your role and how you see the CIO role. What aspects of your role, if any, would you like to do more of, or like to do less of?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. The thing I like to do more of in my role is really making sure that we have the impact that we maximize the positive impact of the things that we're doing. So you have people, process, and technology all going in order to change a certain element of our work. And when you have those different characteristics in place, the people, as we know, is the one that's probably the hardest, because people need to go through that change, and every person is a very unique individual. Technology is more stable, more consistent with what other people are using, in your processes. It's obviously a mixture of the two. So in terms of moving the bar, I want to make sure that the work that we do is defined and refined enough that we can clearly articulate to those doing the work or those receiving the output of the work that we are materially changing their lives in a positive way. To me, that is a big part of my life.
Hang on a second. Are you saying that making clear of the positive impact of your work is something you'd like to do more of?
I'd like to do more of that.
Right, okay.
I'd like to be able to make sure that the work that we're doing, the investments that we're making, have the largest maximum opportunity to be realized and to change our outcomes. In terms of less, I'm not sure if there's the things that I would like to do less are things that are a little more mundane, less strategic, more of the things that happen every day. In a easy way to describe it for people, especially in my seat, is I want to do less things like in the data center. The data center is a utility. The data center is something that has been around for decades, and now it's to the point where it's a commodity type service. You want it to be, you're really managing the service levels, and you want the best price point of that kind of output of that work. But there's nothing really you can do that materially will change that. Those are things that you can buy from several different providers. You don't need to do it yourself. Similar when you start working in some of the managed services areas, so your infrastructure and some of those pieces. Those are things that are table stakes. Those are things that we all have to have. They're things that are very necessary for sure, but it's not why you get up every day. The reason why you get up every day is really to have large measurable impacts upon your business, upon your clinical quality, upon the people that you're privileged to work with, and in our case, that we're privileged to serve, our patients. Because for us, those are things that are part of somebody's quality of life, and it's your friends, it's your family, it's your neighbors, the people you run into in your communities. We impact every single one of those people in one way. So the goal for us to continue to kind of move the bar that way. So if I had to say less of things that are easy, been there, done that, commodity across really all verticals, the things that I like to continue to do more of is reinvest that time into things that truly have a measurable impact upon our goals that feeds into our strategic plan and to accelerate the achievement of our strategic plan.
That's great. That's great. So I'm going to ask you a bit about internal roadblocks to implementing strategy, but I want to clarify something I should have clarified at the beginning, which is that the interview is not just to get quotes to say, Craig Richardville says this. It's also for background and context on the work of the CIO. So not everything that you say is necessarily something I'll take and put your name on it. So the question is, you mentioned that the goals, the strategic goals are aligned. But to begin your answer to the first question, how easy is it to collaborate with other parts of the organization as you roll out the transformation strategy? And have you found any significant roadblocks, for example? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, great question. In terms of collaboration, that is that is part of your culture. And for us, our culture is very open, very transparent. It really is a culture of having one team. So when we go into a discussion, for me, it's important for me to make sure that I am viewed as somebody who understands the benefits of SCL Health and our strategic plan and all the goals and objectives to be able to achieve that plan. I then, as a CIO, bring a certain tool belt to it. But my comprehension of what's happening in all different aspects of our company is really important to me. So first, it's company first, and then there's things that I can bring to add to other places. Part of, excuse me, I got something stuck in my throat. I just took a drink. part of.
You just want to take a break then?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. So, so that's the piece that is very important, is the culture of the organization. We're not siloed. We are very, very collaborative. The one thing that I would say is, are things that are challenges that we have to continue to overcome, is to make sure that as leaders that we are growing leaders, and we're growing leaders who are growing leaders. So we continue to have that flow. I think sometimes as leadership, including myself, sometimes we have a tendency to put ourselves into some comfortable positions that we know what we need to do. We know what decisions need to be made. But part of our job, my job, is to make sure that that next level below me, the next level below them, are also being developed to have that same piece. So the challenge is to hold back what you're doing, teach others to do that, so that you now can reallocate some of that time to some of the larger, more strategic work. So I think that's a challenge I think that every leader has, is to remove themselves as always being the decision maker, always being the one that has to be in the meeting or provide content to the meeting, but to allow others to grow and develop and to be in that seat, to be in your seat, to be in your shoes, so that they can continue to, we can continue to grow that leadership pool. And then for me, that's where a leadership now, the tool belt, that's why the tool belt to me is second nature to being added. Now he or she actually can move into other parts of your organization out from underneath me, because they do have that tool belt, but they're seen first as a leader. And I can put a leader in pretty much any part of the organization, and then they can go ahead and be very successful in that role. So the challenge, I think, for us as me and my seat and others, and I've been privileged enough over my career that I've got almost 8 to 10 CIOs that have worked for me in the past that are now CIOs. And so be able to grow people to move outside of yourself is really one of the leadership challenges. But as a professional parent, that's what you want your child to do. So in your personal life, you want your children to grow outside of having you be there for them at all times. They can be independent and move themselves as being a bigger contributor, in the world and the life, and hopefully to be better than you. You want them to be better than you. And that's what you have to bring into your professional life. Those people that work for you, you want to grow and develop them and give them the opportunities, either inside or outside your company, to be better than you, because then they'll have better contributions to the work.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I hear you on that. Do you think there are any challenges or roadblocks that you had to overcome with regard to implementing new technology?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You'll have you got people that will fully embrace the change. You have people that will be very resistant, and you have this larger group in the middle that is just kind of, I'm not sure, I'm kind of sitting on the fence. So part of your job, part of my job, is to make sure that we bring all three of those pools into the conversations, but we take those that are very positive and want to make that change and focus on them, drive them forward, and communicate, the different characteristics or the different personas that allow that person to be successful with that new technology. And that kind of pulls people along. I think the problem you have is, excuse me, some people have is they push people along. Anytime you get pushed, you as a human, just naturally, you kind of in many cases resist the push. But if I pull you along, you have a tendency then to be a little more open-minded and to follow how that's moving forward with, especially if it's with your peers.
Mm.
The goal is to take those sitting on the fence and to be able to show them what can be achieved by utilizing a certain technology or by changing your process. And then hopefully then those that are against it will at some point realize that maybe they were looking through a lens that they now can change and be able to be part of that also moving forward. So that's kind of how I see technology moving forward. There will be people who embrace it. There'll be people who resist it. And there's a large group in the middle that just isn't sure yet. And part of your job, my job, is to make sure that those that are embracing the change, that they're highlighted and it's clearly communicated. They were here yesterday. Now tomorrow they're actually here by using that tool, and then kind of pull them along. It's kind of like when you see people. This is a very simple, and I don't expect you to use this, but when you see people taking paper notes, and then they go to in your personal life, you make a little shopping list, then you go to the store and you say, "Oh darn, I forgot my shopping list." But those that used Amazon or that use that Google Keep or OneNote or some tool, and they could pull out their phone and say, "Here's my shopping list." So no matter where they're at, they have access to it.
Mm.
When you start moving people from an older technology or a manual process into something that's more refreshing and new, you've got to be able to show, "Hey, by the way, I have the shopping list right here." Well, maybe next time and I can share it to you. I can just give it to you. So, I think part of what we do in business in some cases is we don't always apply what we're doing in our personal life and bring that with us. And when you look at things that we're doing, a simple example is how many bills do you get in the mail anymore? Very any at all. You don't manually do that. That's going back to like my invoice purchase order process. You don't manually do any of that stuff. It's all done with the machine. It's all done online, and you have a confidence in that accuracy of that moving forward. Yet somehow, sometimes when we get into the professional life, we feel the way we were taught and trained is the way we're going to do it for the next 30, 40 years. And really, the way that we're taught and trained needs to continue to evolve and mature and move forward. And with many cases, technology, digital assets, those are things that are going to be helping us do that, make those changes, and elevate, what our contributions are.
One of the things we want to cover in this piece is the common challenges that CIOs sometimes face in implementing technology, many of which you've talked about. But one of them in some organizations might be coordination of the responsibility for different aspects of the tech transformation. And so this question speaks to that point. To what extent do the CIO and the CFO have responsibility over the different areas of digital transformation projects like planning, budgets, implementation, or evaluation? And if so, how does that affect the process of transformation?
Yeah, great question. So your questions are very insightful and what's been typically asked. So the CFO, in his or her role in our organization, it's a her. They do hold, they hold the keys to the kingdom. Their responsibility. Part of their responsibility is truly making sure that we effectively use the dollars that we have available to us all across the organization. It all goes through that seat. So for me, having a good relationship with every member, but when it comes to the CFO, you've got to start to make sure that things that you are doing and presenting that are in the terms of the receiver, not in terms of you. So when I want to share something with our CFO or ask for a request or support of a request to move forward, she's going to ask a lot of the hard questions. And part of my goal is to anticipate what some of those are, and to make sure that when we're presenting that we are looking at all the different assets of the company, so that when we make a presentation or a proposal, that it's very inclusive. It's a setback for me if somebody says, have you thought of this? And we said, oh, darn it, we didn't think of that. Let me go back and redo it. That's kind of the redos, are expensive. That takes time, effort, and energy. Plus, it doesn't always sustain the confidence that you need and the trust that you need to receive approval for items. So I've been very fortunate to be able to work with some very bright people who have taught me over the years and still teaching me today, to make sure that when we start to move things into an approval stage, that it is well thought out, that we've included all the different aspects, whether it's from a financial perspective or quality or time commitment or prioritization, that we kind of move all those things in there so that it's very comprehensive when we make those. And that's, I think, is appreciated by the other members of the C-suite. That it's kind of like going back to the one comment. I have to be able to sit and think and understand and listen what everybody else's questions and concerns are throughout, any process, but then to take those pieces that would be fitting for a project or for a proposal and put it in their terms so that's easy for them to understand, they can comprehend it, they can remember it, and then to hold me accountable for achieving what those things are.
That's great. Well, it's pretty much coming up to time. So I guess I'll just ask if there's anything to do with your view of transformation, which you think I haven't given you an opportunity to talk about yet.
I think, the only thing I will say, Asher, is there is a slew of good or great ideas. So there's a ton of things out there. You just don't have the capacity or the resources to be able to do that work. So it's very important to make sure that you select programs and projects that are measurable to move the bar of the strategy that we talked about. But at the same time, things that are approved, it's important to work through those, not to admire the problem, not to take your time, but to remove those toward completion, success, and optimization and measurement, to create capacity. Because there's a part of our work that nobody knows what it's going to look like tomorrow. And so I've got to create capacity with myself, with my peers, with my leadership, to allow a new idea, a new thought, a new challenge like the pandemic that comes into play, that we can very easily, not easily, but we can very comprehensively respond to that versus having to react to it. And so if you know what's on your plate, kind of like eating, I can't have more food if my plate is full. I've got to finish a portion of that and to allow new food to be entered into it. And I think that's in the professional life. Sometimes we have this scope, or some people have this scope, and this is what we're doing. But I need capacity, because technology is changing so fast. New ideas are changing so fast. And we look at somebody like us in healthcare, one of the things that is changing fast is, in many cases of our business, we're not as unique as maybe what we were a decade ago. So now we have retail coming into healthcare. We have technology companies coming into healthcare. We have, people that are typically played in other verticals now wanting to come into healthcare. So with all those different aspects, the ideas and the thoughts of what they're doing or what they've done something, I've got to have that capacity to pull that in so that I can now, kind of not only bring that into the system, but also accelerate it and put us in the top quartile, top decile of the results or the outcomes of those investments. And so there's so many different changes going on, and you're seeing more people like me in my time. I'm spending a lot more time with people in other verticals. There's an organization called Inspire CIO. It's about 1,000 CIOs around the country. Only a subset of those are clinical. or healthcare. Most of them are not, probably 90%. So I'm learning from what banking has. I'm learning from what retail has. I'm learning from what they've done. And at the same time, they're learning what we're doing, because there are a lot of things that we do that are above and beyond that they can take away and impact their industry and their competitive environment. So we have become less vertically oriented and more as technology leaders and more as leaders of even above the technology piece. And then you got this little part that's the vertical that you're in, whether it's healthcare or retail or banking or insurance, whatever it might be. And those are all, those first two layers are becoming more and more larger, and that uniqueness is becoming less and less.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It becoming more useful to learn from other industries point.
Yeah.
I hear you on that.
Because sometimes, Asher, people will say, I want somebody from outside of industry, or, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go to that was like, you don't understand. Our industry is actually technology or digital transformation. You're just changing a different historical way of how people segregated the work. But for people like me and my seat, it goes all the way across it all. So I'm not leaving my industry at all. If I go to retail, or if I go to a technology company, or if I go to an energy company, I'm still technology. And so kind of a different way to look at it.
Well, I think that's a nice way to end, and a kind of a point that's quite zoomed out on the issue on which is nice.
All right, you have options, I guess. You can do what you want. Well, I appreciate it. It's very nice to know you. Your questions and your comprehension of all your other interviews and studying the subjects coming in. I appreciate that. You gave me some things to think about, so thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Enjoy your week.
Thanks very much for giving me time, and I appreciate your thoughtful answers.
Yeah. Reach out anytime if I can do anything, okay?
Appreciate that. Will do. Have a great weekend. Thanks.
You too. Bye.
Bye.